Hey y'all, it's Megan. And of course, I'm still doing this, still reading from you guys from my boyfriend's house today. Because, of course, again, I have to babysit his dogs. Well, today he's at work, his mom's at work, his sister, which go by they, them pronouns, they're going camping with their sister. Yeah, he's the youngest of 3 kids. I forgot which order it goes in, but all I remember is that my boyfriend is the youngest. Well, I'm the oldest in my family. Anyways, yeah. So let's continue. The last straw. James Garfield admitted to friends that he was never meant for holy matrimony, and that he married Lucretia more out of a sense of honor than anything else. Creedy knew this, of course, and voiced her concern on more than a few occasions. There are hours, she once wrote to Jace, when my heart almost breaks with the cruel thought that our marriage is based upon the cold, stern word duty. Jace did nothing to ease her fears. It was probably a great mistake that we had ever tried married life. Now his wife would insist on enduring dalliances is simply remarkable, especially since there were so many of them. He struck up a relationship at Williams with a sycophant, I think that's how you say, named Rebecca Selleck, and continued to send letters to her after returning to Ohio. Then there was Kate Chase, daughter of the Secretary of the Treasury, and whose company James was out there seeing during a long visit to Washington in 1862. Perhaps the worst part about it all is that Garfield tried to fight his guilt by blunt and delicate honesty. Captain spoke openly to Crete about the women he was with and tried on several occasions to introduce them to her. The humiliation was sometimes too much for her to bear. During their engagement in 1857, Crete took a teaching job in Cleveland just to get away from harem, where the mockery of the relationship had begun to drive her crazy. Murderer with a Heart. When Charles Guiteau shot James Garfield on July 2nd, 1882, it was in fact the second time he approached the president with the intent to kill. The first had occurred on June 18th, and though she couldn't have known it at the time, it was Crete who inadvertently saved her husband's life. Shortly after becoming First Lady, Crete contracted a very nasty case of malaria. Her severe condition worried the bejeebers out of James, much of whose time was taken up fretting over her fate. Indeed, some people in the government began to worry that the administration had virtually stalled. By the middle of June, however, she began to make her heroic comeback, and James went to a cottage on the New Jersey shore in which she could complete her recuperation. It was on the station platform while waiting for a train to Jersey that the two were first approached by Guiteau. But as the assassin later admitted, he couldn't go through with it. Mrs. Garfield looked so thin and she clung so tenderly to the president's arm that I did not have the heart to fire on him. Too bad she wasn't there on July 2nd to pull at Guiteau's heartstrings again. I mean, like, right? Holy hell. But it's fine, it's whatever. Oh, the president's wife. Ellen Herdon Arthur, 1837 to 1880. The future wife of the 21st president, Chester Arthur, was born and raised in Virginia, the daughter of naval officer William Lewis Herdon and his wife Frances Elizabeth Hansberg Herdon. Ellen's family boasted wealth and fame. Her father's exploits as an explorer and his tragic death at sea earned him a monument at the U.S. Naval Academy in Indianapolis. Ellen ran into Chester Arthur in New York City during a visit to her widowed mother. and after a brief courtship agreed to marry the Republican machine politician in 1859. Sorry for that pause, I just thought I saw something through the video, through the camera. But I guess my mind is just playing tricks on me because I haven't been sleeping well. I don't know. You guys let me know. Though she loved Arthur and even eventually bore him 3 children, she soon felt like a fish out of water. Cosmopolitan New York was thrilling, but it was Yankee country, a fact that caused no small amount of trouble for her after the outbreak of the Civil War. Chastised for her Confederate sympathies by her in-laws and separated from her family by the battle line, Ellen sank into a depression that didn't abate completely until the war's conclusion in 1865. Her primary concern thereafter became Arthur's habit of disappearing for long stretches of time on party business. The situation made her consider a separation, but she decided instead to devote her efforts to her other love, music. In fact, it was while returning home from an opera performance in January of 1880 that she caught a very nasty bug, fell into a coma, and never woke up. Away in Albany on business when it happened, Arthur didn't even have a chance to say goodbye to her. Damn. Chapter 18. Frances Cleveland. July 21st, 1864 through October 29th, 1947. Married June 2nd, 1886. Presidential husband. I don't know why those 2 words were hard for me to say. Grover Cleveland. Children: Ruth, Esther, Marion, Richard, Folsom, and Francis Grover. Firstly, from 1886 to 1889 and 1893 to 1897. Astrological sign: Cancer. Religion: Presbyterian. Sound: I could wish the women of our country no better blessing than that their homes and their lives may be as happy, and that their husbands may be as kind and attentive, considerate, and affectionate as mine. Frances Cleveland was the White House's first media star. Countless advisors used her face and name to promote their products. I did not know that. Good to know. One of the first gifts that Grover Cleveland ever gave to his future bride, Frances Folsom, was a baby carriage for her to ride in. 27 years her senior, Cleveland first got to know Frances as a doting uncle and surrogate father. The only president who could honestly claim that his wife was wearing diapers when they first met. When she became a woman, Frank inspired a very different sort of affection from Grover. An affection that would bring his legendary bachelorhood to an end and that would make Frank one of the most popular first ladies in American history. Their long relationship began in Buffalo, New York with tragedy. Frances' father, Oscar Folsom, died in a buggy accident in 1875. Folsom's friend and law partner, Grover Cleveland, became administrator of his estate, unofficial guardian of his daughter. Uncle Cleve, as the girl would come to call him, became a close friend to his late partner's wife, Emma, and a generous provider to little Frank. Attentive and well off financially, Grover paid for his ward's education at private schools, academies, and eventually Wells College, which she entered in 1882. Frank had become a tall, dark-haired, blue-eyed beauty with a graceful demeanor and precocious intellect. Why was that so hard for me to say? At Wells, she majored in French, German, and driving the boys crazy. Though twice engaged, Frank seemed almost bored with the frothy young stallion who carried her books across the quad. She seemed to want something more. When I marry, it must be someone more than a year older than me. Someone I can look up to and respect. Like Uncle Cleve, perhaps. For his part, Grover kept up a lively correspondence with his pretty charge, and as she blossomed into a lively and erudite woman, became prouder by the moment. As for what happened next, there's no point in beating around the bush. Grover realized he was hot for the woman who'd been like a dart to him, but by the time Frank was looking forward to graduation, Grover already had a mistress, and her name was the United States. After rising through the ranks of the Buffalo political machine, Grover became governor of New York and in 1884 won the presidential election on the Democratic ticket. A painfully honest workaholic, he was first confirmed bachelor president as James Buchanan and a man in his late 40s. He didn't think much of Merch, but he thought very much of Frank Folsom, a fact he managed to conceal beneath a veneer of tireless political labor, despite one off-the-cuff remark that he was waiting for his wife to grow up. But when the president invited Emma and Frank Folsom to pay a visit to the White House, all of Washington started buzzing. Was the chief executive planning on putting his single days behind? Wouldn't the widow Folsom make a charming wife and first lady? And that darling Frank, what a glamorous stepdaughter she'd make. Grover did indeed propose in August of 1885, but not to his old friend Emma. His engagement to young Frances was cloaked in the darkness of government secrecy, and having secured a yes from the blushing bride-to-be, he sent her and her mother off on a tour of Europe. The press was left to make their own assumption, which they did, following the Folsoms to Europe and anticipating a wedding on their return. They got it, of course, but the wrong Folsom was wearing white. The surprise merely heightened the natural sense of excitement. Cleveland was the first city president of his wedding ceremony in the White House, and the public, barred from the match at the interior, gathered in throngs outside to be part of it. It was more than the beginning of a marriage. It was the beginning of a love affair between the new First Lady and her adoring people. The newlyweds escaped to rural Maryland for their honeymoon, where they got a taste of what they were in for. For a week, they were hounded by hungry reporters. Frank had become an overnight sensation. She was beautiful, young, at 27, the youngest of all our First Ladies, fluent in foreign languages, extremely well educated, modest, forthright, and even musically talented. Not only did Frank play the piano, but opera star Annalena Patti would later tell the First Lady that she had the voice to go professional, and those were just her bad qualities. Frank became an unofficial champion for women's education and professionalism, sponsored a charity that made clothing for the poor, devoted time and energy to helping African Americans, and accepted a seat on the board of her alma mater, Wells College, a position she would hold for 50 years. As soon as she became First Lady, special Saturday receptions were held at the White House for working women to attend. Try to imagine this happening nowadays. We can't. Her White House events were exceedingly popular, drawing rich and poor alike, and Frank came to embody the administration's willingness to reach out. Smiling, enthusiastic, and sincere, the First Lady shook hands until her palm was black and she needed to soothe her arm and eyes. Wow. Kind of like how I would be if I was First Lady. Could this woman do any wrong? No. Which is why her husband's opponents made up stuff to cast the administration in bad light. During her engagement to the president, Frank was really introduced to her husband's scandalous past by a cartoon that made reference to the fact that Grover had admitted to fathering an illegitimate child by a Buffalo woman named Muriel Hopton. It hardly caused a hiccup in their relationship, but in 1888, as Grover struggled for re-election, the opposition pulled out all the stops and spread a false rumor that the president frequently got drunk and beat his poor wife. Until now, Frank had been treated like a darling by the country and press, but she assumed the hatred of the newspapers that was consuming her husband and retaliated in print. It did her and Grover no good. Benjamin Harrison won the 1888 election. Damn! Now, Jerry, the outgoing First Lady, told the White House during 1889, I want you to take good care of all the furniture and ornaments in the house. We're coming back just 4 years from today. Astonishingly, Frank was right. The Clintons moved to New York City, where the limelight continued to shine upon them. Their first child, Ruth, had a candy bar named after her. Baby Ruth. Yeah, I never really liked Baby Ruth. Comment down below if you guys like Baby Ruth or what your favorite candies are. Mine are like Reese's, Hershey's. Not for you, Sage. She poked her head up when I said Hershey's. She loves foods that she can't eat. Like, but yeah, mine are like Reese's, Hershey's. A candy called whatchamacallit. It's actually called whatchamacallit. I didn't forget what it was called, but it's actually called whatchamacallit. What else? Bubblegum cigarettes. Not the candied one, but the actual bubblegum one. And I think that's about it I can think of off the top of my head. But comment down below what you guys' favorite candy are. If they are even Baby Ruth or whatever. Comment down below. But when Grover got back into the presidential race in 1892, he did it with a vengeance. And he won re-election largely because his wife was so popular. Since 1886, Frank Cleveland had become America's goddess and the Republican Party's bane. Advertisers used her image to sell everything from soap to arsenic-based curatives. Few homes in the nation were without a frame likeness of her on the mantle. Republican strategists openly admitted that Bachelor Cleveland would be much easier to beat than one married to the beloved Frankie. And the Democratic Party produced buttons, posters, and plates featuring Frank's portrait above her husband's and his running mate's Gardner votes. Not even Dolly Madison had enjoyed such celebrity. It was unprecedented, and it was powerful. Cleveland won the election, but as the old saying goes, be careful what you wish for. Frances was no longer the shiny June that she was during her husband's first term. She now had children to look after. Children whose celebrity required her to make unpopular choices to secure their safety. Grover wasn't quite what he used to be either. Confronted with a crippling economic crisis, the president relied on stale fiscal policies that only made things worse and angered the growing leaders of the poor. During their first term in the White House, the Clevelands chose to spend their private time outside of the social season in a private home which they sought sanctuary from the hated press. Now they did it again. Playing the scrutiny of newspapermen who starved for stories simply made them. It was a hard time for the first couple, but Frank ran the household like she always had, with a talented grace and imagination. In addition to bearing her second child, Esther, the First Lady oversaw a social schedule that welcomed common working class visitors as well as the Queen of Spain. A beautiful bond had been formed with the staff by the end of the administration, a bond that both the servants and the First Lady were loath to break. At the completion of Cleveland's second term, Frank broke down in tears while saying goodbye to the mansion's employees. Soon Grover bought a place in the New Jersey countryside, ideal for quiet family time. Though retirement suited them both well, tragedy was waiting on the horizon. In 1903, the famous Baby Ruth died from diphtheria. Grover himself followed suit in 1908, leaving Frank with 4 kids and $250,000, I think, $250,000. Which cast like that is no wonder she never accepted an annual pension from Congress. Besides, she was still young and full of married potential. In 1913, she married Thomas Preston Jr., a scholar who could measure up to her high intellectual standards. Preston eventually became a professor of archaeology at Princeton, while Frank spent her time in charity, leading the women's university club that she helped found and making speeches during World War I to help the war effort. When she died peacefully in her sleep in 1947, Grover got her back. Frank was buried next to him in Princeton. Please rate, comment, and subscribe down below. And if you're on YouTube, please ring that bell notification so you can know when I upload next. And if you're on TikTok, please like and follow my videos. And please pay for something on either my eBay and or my card. Okay, bye.